There has been no shortage of betrayal stories in movies and TV shows, but today I want to tell you about a betrayal that I guarantee you've never heard of. Only the most infamous betrayal in African history. A betrayal so insidious that the person who committed this heinous act of treason was shunned and looked down upon by every single person in the country. This is the story of Haile Selassie Gugsa, Africa's biggest traitor. Haile Selassie Gugsa, born in 1907, was an Ethiopian army commander and member of the imperial family from Tigray, the northern region of Ethiopia. Haile Selassie Gugsa was the son of Lul Ras Gugsa Arya Selassie. Gugsa Arya Selassie was the Shum of the eastern Tigray province, as well as the great-grandson of Emperor Yohannes, who was Emperor of Ethiopia from 1871 to 1889, therefore making Haile Selassie Gugsa a descendant of Yohannes. In 1932, Gugsa Arya Selassie's health started to gradually deteriorate, and he eventually fell ill. He had arranged a trip to Switzerland for medical help. However, tradition dictated that a Ras travel via war mule, which is exactly what he did. His doctor insisted that he should stop traveling this way, but tradition won out, and he died on April 28th. The sad part is, had he traveled in a stretcher, there would have been a good chance he would have made it. Nonetheless, Gugsa Arya Selassie's death led to his son Haile Selassie Gugsa replacing him as Shum of Eastern Tigray with the title of Dejezmach. Eventually, on June 15th, 1932, Haile Selassie Gugsa would get married to Lilt Zenebewerk Haile Selassie, the then Emperor Haile Selassie's second daughter. He was 25 at the time and she was nearly 14. Zenebewerk ended up dying in 1934, a mere 2 years later, and this led to relations between Gugsa and Emperor Selassie becoming quite cold. The strain between them was especially apparent when the emperor insisted on bringing his daughter's body back to the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, for burial, rather than allowing her husband to bury her in the capital of Eastern Tigray, Mekelle. This was a clear sign of Emperor Haile Selassie's unhappiness with his son-in-law. Gugsa, on the other hand, was very bitter over the fact that he was not elevated to the titles of Ras and Lul, which had been held by his father before him, and were now held by his rival Seyoum Mengesha of Western Tigray. Around this time, fascism was beginning to grow into a real threat around the world, and one of the first victims of this rising political movement was Ethiopia. On October 3rd, 1935, Benito Mussolini led his troops into Ethiopia with a surprise invasion of the country. The reason for the invasion being to boost Italian national prestige, which was wounded after humiliating defeat at the hands of Ethiopia during the Battle of Ottawa in 1896. Ethiopia won the Battle of Ottawa even though they were at a severe disadvantage, being the less developed nation, leading to Ethiopia becoming the only African country to never be colonized. Italy never forgot about this, and now was the time to seek revenge. During the time of the invasion, Haile Selassie Gugsa was the commander of the Mekelle sector. As the Italians advanced, Emperor Haile Selassie ordered Ras Seyoum Mengesha to move back 55 miles from the border and ordered Dejezmach Haile Selassie Gugsa to move back 35 miles from the border. This was done to show the League of Nations that Italy was clearly the aggressor. Unfortunately, the League of Nations could do nothing for Ethiopia except condemn the actions of Italy. But that wasn't enough, as Ethiopia was getting completely overpowered by the Italians. A week later, things weren't looking good for Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie Gugsa, remembering all the built-up resentment he had for the king and for his rival, decided to do the unthinkable. On October 10th, Haile Selassie Gugsa, knowing his country was about to get steamrolled, made the decision to head over to the Italian side and announce his submission to Italian rule. Immediately, the Italians took advantage of this opportunity, releasing photographs of Haile Selassie Gugsa participating in war councils with the Italian commander on the northern front, General De Bono. Furious, the Tigrean patriots in Mekelle promptly set fire to Gugsa's home, and on November 8th, Mekelle officially fell. Some sources suggest that Haile Selassie Gugsa and his forces played an active part in aiding the Italian invasion, which, if true, would be insanely messed up, considering hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians, men, women, and children, were massacred, and numerous war crimes were committed by the Italians, including the use of chemical weapons. However, other sources indicate that Gugsa's men were quickly disarmed. Either way, Haile Selassie Gugsa remained loyal to the Italians, who at a minimum used him for propaganda purposes during the invasion and the following 5 years of occupation. During all this, the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, was forced to leave his country and take refuge in Britain, and at this moment, Italy reigned supreme. In 1936, Benito Mussolini had appointed the previous king of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III, as the new king of Ethiopia. Additionally, Haile Selassie Gugsa was honored by the Italians with the title of Ras, which had been denied him by Emperor Haile Selassie, as well as an Italian pension and recognition as the senior Tigrean prince over his rival Seyoum Mengesha. With everything he ever wanted in the palm of his hands, his noble titles, elevation over his rival, and power on the level of Europeans, all given to him by the Italians, it's safe to assume Haile Selassie Gugsa was not regretting his decision. In May 1938, Haile Selassie Gugsa was in Italy to welcome German dictator Adolf Hitler when the Nazi leader paid a state visit to King Victor Emmanuel III. Hitler was visiting at the invitation of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini in Rome. Gugsa spent about a week with the fascist leaders in Italy and had the honor of watching Italian war demonstrations, such as Mussolini's son Bruno leading a squadron of 28 gleaming Italian bombers that sank two 23,000-ton empty freighters in the Tyrrhenian Sea in a matter of minutes. And he also watched an Italian play called Aida with the Fuhrer, about an Ethiopian princess in ancient Egypt looking for love. During the last day of the trip, Emperor Haile Selassie was preparing in London to make his last stand at Geneva, while on the other hand his son-in-law traveled obediently in the entourage of conquerors Vittorio Emanuele and Mussolini as they took dictator Hitler out on the last day of his Rome visit. When they showed the art lovers some framed pieces from numerous different museums, Gugsa, now back in his country, rode in triumph into his old capital of Mekelle. Behind him, an Italian officer held high the Italian flag that had been hauled down from the same Ethiopian village in 1896. Behind them both marched a carefully chosen column of Ras Gugsa's own tribesmen. They would be ordered to move into the palace by General Emilio de Bolo, and later appointed the puppet government of the Tigray province by Italy. By the 27th of September 1939, during the Feast of Maskal in Addis Ababa, Ras Haile Selassie Gugsa, Ras Haile Tekle Haymanot, and Ras Seyoum Mengesha sat with Amido, 3rd Duke of Aosta, the Viceroy and Governor General of Italian East Africa. All three Ethiopian leaders had submitted to Italian control of what had been their homeland and what was now the Italian colony. In 1941, towards the end of the liberation of Italian East Africa by British Commonwealth and Ethiopian Patriotic Forces, Haile Selassie Gugsa was temporarily placed in power in Tigray by the British. British Brigadier Maurice Stanley Lush, Deputy Chief Political Officer for Ethiopia, placed him back in command of Eastern Tigray province, with the intention of separating Tigray from Ethiopia, joining it to Eritrea, and establishing a new Greater Tigray/Tigrinya monarchy under either Haile Selassie Gugsa or Ras Seyoum Mengesha. This plan had the support of many British colonial officers, but not of the British High Command nor of the British government. And Ras Seyoum proved to be cold towards any plan of dismembering the Ethiopian Empire. The Lush group had hoped that Haile Selassie Gugsa would be more accommodating. However, Haile Selassie Gugsa was soon caught corresponding with the Italians, thus proving his loyalty to the Italians did not stem from any reasonable fear or weakness, but because Italy gave him what his own father-in-law never could: respect and honor. Although he was too blind to see he was being used, in his heart he made the right choice. As a result of this discovery, the British took him into custody and kept him first in British-held Asmara. The government of Emperor Haile Selassie I approached the British administration and listed the crimes and treason of Haile Selassie Gugsa and requested his extradition. The British indicated that they would extradite him only after obtaining a promise that his punishment would not include death. However, the British ultimately removed Haile Selassie Gugsa from Asmara and sent him to the Seychelles for safekeeping. In 1946, after continued requests for extradition, Haile Selassie Gugsa was returned to the Ethiopians. In 1947, he stood trial and was declared a fascist collaborator and a traitor. Haile Selassie Gugsa then threw himself on the mercy of the emperor. As a result, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He was placed under house arrest for 28 years. His Italian-supplied honorific title of Ras was not recognized, and he reverted to his old title of Dejizmech. In 1947, Eastern Tigray was incorporated into Western Tigray and was governed by Ras Seyoum Mengesha as hereditary prince of all Tigray. Dejizmech Haile Selassie Gugsa and his side of the family of Emperor Johannes VI fell from grace. They no longer enjoyed favor either from the emperor in Addis Ababa or from Ras Seyoum Mengesha in Tigray. In 1974, the communist group Derg killed the emperor and toppled the Ethiopian monarchy, and Dejizmech Haile Selassie Gugsa was freed. However, even after he was released, the Derg continued to regard him as a fascist collaborator and as a traitor to his country, because unfortunately for Gugsa, a nation neither forgets nor forgives a traitor. With most of the characters in this story already dead by this point, such as Hitler, Mussolini, and Haile Selassie, it's only right that Gugsa would die as well. In early 1985,